Captain Mira Hale leaned against the cool metal wall of the Earth Alliance outpost, her eyes fixed on the display before her. Across the galaxy, in a pristine, sterile lab filled with an assortment of alien equipment, a gathering of alien scientists dissected human tech, their laughter broadcast across open frequencies as if mocking humanity's entire existence. The lead scientist, Dr. Xylox, raised what appeared to be a standard Earth laser rifle and shook it as though it were a relic from a primitive civilization. "Look at this," Xylox's voice echoed, rich with arrogance and amusement. "It's barely more than a flashlight, and these humans believe they have a right to explore the galaxy? Ha!" The other scientists chortled, alien voices forming a discordant melody of disdain. Each laugh struck a nerve for Mira. Her jaw tightened, but she forced herself to breathe. To stay calm, she knew the truth. Soon enough, so would they. This broadcast wasn't just a taunt, it was a threat. A message that alien eyes were on humanity, studying them like insects under a magnifying glass. Mira was keenly aware of what the Confederacy thought of humans, barely evolved creatures, suited only for manual labor or, worse, as a source of resources. Dr. Xylox and his team intended to strip Earth bare, seeing it as little more than a convenience store stocked with minerals and organic matter. But what irked her most was their certainty that humanity posed no danger. Her fingers curled into fists as she watched the screen, her heart pounding. These scientists had no idea about the hidden strengths of the Earth Alliance, the secrets buried deep beneath the outpost where she now stood. One of those secrets, the plasma cannon, had the power to obliterate an entire fleet with a single blast. But revealing it now was a dangerous choice. If the Confederacy learned of humanity's full arsenal, it would spark a war far sooner than Earth was ready for. Her orders were clear: keep humanity's power hidden until there was no other option. Yet as she watched Xylox's smug expression, she wondered how long she could wait. The weight of responsibility bore down on Mira, amplified by the silence in her command center. Her crew had gathered behind her, watching the broadcast with expressions ranging from fury to doubt. Most of them were fresh recruits, trained for basic defense, and untested in actual combat. They had never faced an enemy that mocked them so openly, an enemy with far superior numbers and technology. She saw the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes, the quiet question, "Are we truly ready for this?" Mira pushed back her own doubts. She had been chosen for this post because she was steadfast, resilient, and above all, a believer in humanity's potential. She straightened, turning to address her crew, each word infused with a steely determination. "I know what you're all thinking," she said, her voice steady. "But this arrogance, it's their greatest weakness. They think we're easy to conquer. They think we're unprepared." Her gaze swept over her crew, who were now standing a little taller, their chins lifted. "They have no idea what humanity is truly capable of." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, but Mira sensed their lingering unease. These scientists were more than a nuisance. They were the vanguard of a larger force. The Confederacy wasn't here just to poke around. They were here to test, to probe, and to decide whether Earth was worth their time. And if Dr. Xylox deemed humans defenseless, the next wave would be warships, not scientists. The stakes were higher than anyone could imagine. But Mira had a plan. She had spent countless hours strategizing, studying the alien fleet's movements, anticipating their every tactic. She was prepared to keep the Confederacy at bay, to protect Earth with every fiber of her being. Yet she was painfully aware that her communication with Earth had been compromised by a recent solar storm. Her connection to the High Command was patchy, their directives delayed, and she was left to make critical decisions on her own. It was a pressure she hadn't expected, but Mira thrived under pressure. In many ways, she had been training for this her entire life. The broadcast continued, with Dr. Xylox moving on to another piece of human technology, a missile, outdated and visibly battered from field use. He smirked, holding it up for the camera. "Observe, my esteemed colleagues," he announced, his tone dripping with condescension. "This they call a weapon. I'd be more concerned about a child's slingshot." More laughter erupted, alien voices grating on Mira's last nerve. It was a display meant to humiliate, to show the galaxy that humans were beneath consideration. But to Mira, it was also a fatal miscalculation. She turned off the display, her gaze hardening as she looked out at her crew. She knew the time was coming when they'd have to defend this outpost, not with bluffing or diplomacy, but with brute force. Her hand hovered near the console that activated the plasma cannon, its controls embedded deep in the command center, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. She had studied the weapon's capabilities. It could reduce an enemy ship to atoms in seconds, rendering their shields useless. Yet deploying it now would mean forfeiting the one strategic advantage humanity held, their secrecy. Still, there was something undeniably gratifying in imagining Dr. Xylox's face if he saw what real human weaponry could do. Mira clenched her fists, feeling the adrenaline simmering beneath her composure. There was a saying in the Alliance: humility is earned, not assumed. Soon the Confederacy would learn that lesson the hard way. The silence in the room grew heavy as her crew stood by, their expressions a mix of awe and anticipation. Mira could feel their resolve building, a slow but certain shift from fear to readiness. She knew they would follow her to the end, even if they doubted their own capabilities. They believed in her, and that was enough. As if sensing her inner conflict, her second in command, Lieutenant Reyes, stepped forward. "Captain, whatever you decide, we're with you," he said quietly. "We all know what's at stake. Just give the order." Mira met his gaze, a brief but meaningful connection. She nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. Her crew was young, inexperienced, but they were united, ready to defend their home with everything they had. A beeping sound broke the silence, signaling an incoming transmission. Mira turned back to the console, her face hardening as Dr. Xylox's voice crackled through once again, his tone mocking. "So, Captain Hale, will you show us your grand defenses, or will you hide behind your walls?" Mira inhaled deeply, her mind racing. She knew what she had to do, but the timing had to be perfect. She leaned forward, pressing the comms button, her voice calm and defiant. "Dr. Xylox," she replied, a hint of steel in her voice. "I think you'll find humans full of surprises." As the transmission ended, she looked over her crew one last time, her eyes fierce and unwavering. Captain Mira Hale stood at the center of the command room. The lights dimmed as the outpost's proximity alarms pulsed in a low, steady rhythm. Her eyes were fixed on the holographic display hovering before her, a detailed grid of the surrounding space with flashing red dots marking the alien fleet's ships as they edged closer, inch by inch. Each pulse of the alarms felt like a countdown, reminding her of how little time remained. Dr. Xylox and his team were just a vanguard, a group of scientists who had come to study and probe. But if things went poorly today, they'd be sending the real soldiers next. She felt the tension in the room, her crew moving between stations with quick but nervous steps. This was the kind of fight none of them had been prepared for, the kind of enemy that dwarfed their training in both technology and sheer arrogance. Mira had always believed in her team's strength, but she could feel the cracks in their morale, especially now, as the alien fleet loomed closer. They'd never faced an interstellar enemy before, much less one as powerful as the Confederacy. "Captain, their ships have reached tactical range," said Lieutenant Reyes, his voice steady but tinged with worry. He looked up from his console, his gaze meeting hers. Mira could see the unspoken question there. "Are we ready for this?" She nodded, feeling a sense of duty to keep her own doubts hidden. They had to believe in her, even if she was standing alone in her convictions. "Keep tracking their movements, Lieutenant," Mira replied, her voice calm. "Let's make sure they don't suspect a thing. We're going to let them think we're helpless a little longer." But deep down, she knew that holding back was a risk. The plasma cannon could end this in an instant if she chose to activate it. But Earth's leaders had made their stance clear in her last transmission before the solar storm had severed communication. Maintain peace, if possible. They didn't understand the situation as she did. Mira knew the Confederacy wouldn't leave them alone, not unless they were made to, but she respected her orders, and she would follow them, at least until there was no other option. "Captain," a young officer called out, pulling Mira's attention back to the display. "Incoming message from Dr. Xylox. He's asking for a demonstration of our defenses, as a courtesy." A quiet murmur ran through the room, punctuated by a few frustrated sighs. Mira sensed her crew's frustration, the helpless feeling of being forced into a corner. Dr. Xylox wanted a show, wanted to see just how primitive their technology was, so he could have one last laugh before tearing it apart. She clenched her fists, debating how to respond, weighing the consequences. If she revealed their defenses too early, they'd lose the advantage of surprise. But if they waited too long, Dr. Xylox might grow suspicious. She pressed a button, activating the comms link. "Dr. Xylox," she began, her tone measured and composed. "Our defenses aren't on display for your entertainment. We're a peaceful outpost. We have no quarrel with you." "Oh, Captain Hale," Xylox replied, his voice slick with mockery. "Don't be so modest. We're just curious to see how your peaceful civilization manages to survive in such a dangerous galaxy. Surely you have something to show us." Mira gritted her teeth. The words stung, but she had to be strategic. Every instinct told her to end the conversation and prepare the plasma cannon, But her rational side won out. She couldn't afford to be impulsive. "Then perhaps you'd best stay clear of our space," she replied coolly, hoping to deflect his curiosity. But Xylox only chuckled, as if he were in on a joke no one else understood. "Oh, don't worry, Captain. We're merely observers here, though I must admit we're quite curious about how long you can hold out against true power." The transmission ended, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. Mira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle like stones in her stomach. This was a game to Xylox, an exercise in humiliation. The alien fleet had no intention of leaving. They were here to provoke, to push and prod until she broke, and when she finally did, they'd pounce. "Status update on their fleet," she ordered, turning to her crew. "They're moving into a tighter formation, Captain," Reyes reported. "Looks like they're preparing to fire on the outpost." A ripple of unease passed through the command center. Mira saw the fear in her crew's eyes, but she also saw a spark of defiance, a resilience that refused to be snuffed out. They were afraid, but they trusted her. That was all she needed. "All right, listen up," she called out, her voice carrying authority and calm. "We've trained for this. They think we're weak and they'll underestimate us at every turn. That's our advantage. We'll play along, make them think they're right, until they're close enough for us to strike." She watched her words settle over her crew like a rallying cry. They moved with renewed purpose, each step calculated, each movement efficient. They would stand together, even in the face of overwhelming odds. She could see it in their eyes, the glint of resolve that she'd come to depend on. Turning back to the holographic display, she could see the alien ships forming a blockade around the outpost. Xylox's fleet moved with precision, coordinating as one, each ship covering the others in perfect formation. They were like a wall of metal and plasma, ready to crush any resistance. "Captain, they're powering up weapons," Reyes said, his voice tight with tension. Mira's heart pounded, but she maintained her composure. "Hold steady," she ordered. "We're going to wait until they're within optimal range for the plasma cannon. We only get one shot at this." They watched the ships inch closer, oblivious to the weapon lurking beneath their feet. It was a high-stakes gamble, a game of patience and nerves. Mira glanced at the plasma cannon's activation panel, her fingers itching to initiate the sequence, but she forced herself to wait. Timing was everything. "Captain," a voice broke through the silence, urgent but controlled. "We're receiving high-energy readings from their lead vessel. They're preparing to fire." The entire command room tensed, breaths held as they waited for her next command. Mira felt the pressure bearing down on her shoulders, the weight of every life under her command. She had to time this perfectly. "Steady," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Wait until they're close enough." The alien fleet moved in, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. Mira could feel the anticipation thicken the air, a silent countdown ticking toward a single moment. Her crew watched her, their lives placed squarely in her hands, trusting her to lead them through this. As the alien ships inched closer, Mira felt the thrill of impending battle. She looked at Reyes, who nodded, his face a mirror of her own resolve. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. "Prepare the plasma cannon for activation," she said, her voice calm and steady, a thread of steel running through her words. They were ready. Captain Mira Hale could feel the gravity of her decision weighing heavily on her. As the alien fleet loomed just beyond her outpost's perimeter, there was no more denying it. Dr. Xylox had brought them here to test humanity's strength, and ultimately their resolve. He was still playing his game, still mocking and taunting, oblivious to the fact that humanity's greatest weapon lay hidden beneath the very outpost he now threatened. But Mira knew the time for games had passed. Now it was all about survival, and perhaps about leaving a lasting impression on the galaxy. "Attention, all hands," Mira announced over the intercom, her voice echoing through the tense, silent corridors of the outpost. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. We are preparing for an imminent engagement. Each of you has trained for this. Now's the time to show what you're made of." A ripple of energy surged through the crew, lifting the spirits of even the most anxious among them. She could feel the renewed focus in the room, their shared purpose vibrating through every corner of the command center. Their trust in her was palpable, and she would honor that trust by making sure they were ready. Her plan was simple yet daring. Lure Dr. Xylox and his fleet close enough to strike with the plasma cannon, the weapon he had so arrogantly disregarded. "Lieutenant Reyes," she called, gesturing for him to join her by the main console. "We're going to set up decoy positions around the perimeter. I want the aliens to think we're scrambling, trying to shield ourselves with what they see as outdated technology. Use some of the old drones. We'll make it look like we're running scared." Reyes's eyes sparkled with understanding. He knew exactly what Mira was planning. "Yes, Captain," he replied, his voice steady. "We'll position the decoys to make it look like we're reinforcing the front line." Mira nodded, feeling a small spark of satisfaction. She knew Dr. Xylox's type well enough to predict how he'd react. The decoy maneuver would feed right into his biases, confirming his belief that humanity's defenses were a desperate, haphazard attempt to delay the inevitable. That was the beauty of it. Their apparent helplessness would lure the aliens closer, right into the plasma cannon's optimal firing range. Her strategy hinged on letting their underestimation become their downfall. Reyes returned to his console, and Mira watched her crew as they worked, a sense of pride swelling within her. Each of them moved with precision and purpose, every step echoing their trust in her leadership and in the mission itself. She knew they were afraid. She could see it in the tense lines on their faces and in the way their hands occasionally trembled, but they were also ready, fueled by a shared determination to protect their home and prove themselves. Mira turned back to her display, where the alien fleet was slowly edging closer. Dr. Xylox's ship loomed at the front, a hulking vessel brimming with advanced weaponry and shimmering shields, an imposing sight designed to inspire fear. But Mira was no stranger to intimidation tactics. She let a slow, determined breath out, her eyes narrowing. "You're just another overconfident fool who thinks you have the galaxy figured out," she thought. In her mind, she could already picture the moment of impact, the plasma cannon igniting, its energy slicing through the darkness of space and tearing through the alien fleet. But she couldn't get lost in the vision of victory. Timing was everything. They would only get one chance at this, and she needed every move to be perfect. "Captain, decoys are in position," Reyes announced, his voice breaking her thoughts. Mira nodded in approval, glancing at the holographic display where the decoys formed a scattered but deliberate pattern. To an outside observer, it looked like a hasty, desperate attempt to bolster defenses, but to Mira, it was a carefully laid trap. She activated the comms link and addressed her team once more, her tone firm yet reassuring. "All units, hold your positions. Keep all defensive systems on standby and wait for my order. We want them close, right on top of us. When they fire, we'll give them a taste of something they never saw coming." Her words lingered in the air, fueling a quiet sense of anticipation that rippled through her crew. She could see the transformation in their faces. They were no longer just soldiers stationed at an outpost, but warriors ready to defend their home and each other. Mira allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. They were ready, but her mind remained focused on the mission. Mira knew that one misstep could expose their true capabilities before they had a chance to strike. The plasma cannon was humanity's trump card, but it was also an untested weapon. They had yet to see its full power, and part of her wondered if they could truly control it. She pushed the doubts aside, forcing herself to stay in the present. "Captain," Reyes said, drawing her attention back to the display, "the alien fleet has reached the perimeter. They're taking the bait. Dr. Xylox is moving his flagship forward." A faint smile crossed Mira's face, but it was tinged with a hint of steel. Dr. Xylox had no idea what was waiting for him. His confidence, so obvious in his taunts and sneers, would soon be shattered. She only needed him to come a little closer. "Stay steady, everyone," she said, her voice low but resonant. "Let them come to us. We need them in range for the plasma cannon." Her crew watched in silence as the alien ships drifted closer, each second stretching into an eternity. Mira could feel the tension building, the anticipation so thick it was almost tangible. She allowed her gaze to rest on the activation panel for the plasma cannon, her fingers hovering near the controls, waiting for the perfect moment. The weapon's activation sequence was lengthy, and once started, there was no turning back. Every choice would be final. Every second would count. In the silence, the sound of the alien ship's weapon systems powering up reached her ears, a low hum that reverberated through the outpost's walls. The lights in the command center flickered briefly, and Mira knew it was time. "Captain, they're preparing to fire," Reyes said, his voice tense but steady. Mira's gaze hardened. She activated the comms link, her voice calm but sharp. "All hands, brace for impact. This is it. We hold the line until I give the signal." The alien ships began to glow with the buildup of energy, their weapons aimed squarely at the outpost. Mira's pulse quickened, her heart pounding as she watched the display. Every instinct told her to press the button, to unleash the plasma cannon and end this now. But she held back, waiting, watching, and then the alien flagship fired. The blast struck the outer defenses, sending a shudder through the outpost. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and Mira's crew scrambled to maintain their positions, but Mira remained calm, her gaze focused, her mind unyielding. "Hold steady," she commanded, her voice unwavering. She turned to Reyes and nodded, giving him the signal to initiate the plasma cannon's activation sequence. The room went silent as Reyes's hands flew over the controls, each second ticking by like an eternity. Mira clenched her fists, her eyes locked on the holographic display, watching as the alien ships drew even closer. In that moment, Mira knew they had only one chance, one shot to make a mark that the galaxy would never forget. Captain Mira Hale watched as the first alien blast ripped into the outer defenses of the outpost, sending shockwaves through the command center. The lights flickered, and her crew braced themselves against the sudden, jarring tremor. Yet Mira stood unmoved, her gaze fixed on the holographic display as the alien ships closed in, every detail etched into her mind. This was it. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to act, to unleash the plasma cannon and end this, but she knew the timing had to be perfect. They needed the aliens even closer. "Status report," she barked, her voice cutting through the alarms blaring around them. "Outer shields are holding for now, but they won't last long, Captain," Reyes replied, his tone tight with urgency. "We're seeing significant strain across all defensive systems. They're preparing another barrage." Mira clenched her jaw, aware that her crew was counting on her to make the call. Every second the plasma cannon remained idle was a second closer to collapse for their outer defenses, but she knew they had to weather this storm a little longer. The aliens needed to feel confident, assured of their victory, and she would give them that satisfaction just long enough to set the stage for a devastating counterstrike. "Hold your positions," she ordered, projecting calm authority. "Let them believe they're winning. We're going to make this count." Her crew nodded, steeling themselves as the alien ships launched another round of fire. Explosions echoed through the outpost, the walls trembling under the impact. Mira's gaze flickered to the plasma cannon's activation panel, watching as the sequence finalized. The power readings climbed steadily, signaling the weapon's readiness. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the culmination of every decision she'd made up to this point. "Captain, the plasma cannon is fully charged," Reyes reported, his voice barely containing the tension. "We're ready to fire on your command." Mira looked at her crew, their faces illuminated by the glow of the monitors, each of them waiting, trusting her to make the right choice. She nodded slowly, letting the gravity of her words sink in. "This is it. We'll give them one warning shot, let them see what they're dealing with, and then we end this." She took a steadying breath, then gave the final order. "Fire the plasma cannon." Reyes's fingers flew over the controls, and in an instant, the plasma cannon roared to life. A deafening hum filled the command center as the weapon discharged, sending a massive beam of energy slicing through the darkness of space. The beam was blinding, a searing column of pure plasma that lit up the surrounding void, making everything in its path seem fragile and insignificant. The beam struck the lead alien ship with devastating precision, carving through its shields as though they were made of paper. For a split second, there was silence, a stillness as if the universe itself had paused to witness the sheer, unbridled power unleashed from the human outpost. Then the alien ship exploded in a brilliant fiery blaze, scattering debris and fragments in all directions. A collective gasp filled the command center as the crew watched the aftermath. Alien ships broke formation, pulling back in shock, and Mira saw the message begin to sink in. The aliens had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. A transmission crackled to life, and Dr. Xylox's face appeared on the screen, his previous smugness replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. His eyes were wide, his mouth agape as he struggled to process what had just happened. What is this?" he stammered, his voice wavering. You can't have." "Believe it, Doctor," Mira interrupted, her tone hard and unyielding. "This is only a fraction of our capabilities. Your arrogance led you here, and it's your own downfall. Leave now, and maybe I'll consider sparing the rest of your fleet." For the first time, Dr. Xylox seemed lost, uncertain. His confidence had been shattered, replaced by a dawning realization that the humans he had so readily mocked possessed a weapon beyond anything he could have imagined. His face twitched, caught between fear and fury, but he managed to regain a sliver of composure. You think you can intimidate the Confederacy?" he sneered, though his voice shook. "We are millions strong. You are nothing but a single outpost." Mira held his gaze unflinching. "Then let this be a message to your millions. Humanity will not bow to anyone. We have the power to protect ourselves, and we won't hesitate to use it." Xylox's image flickered and then disappeared as he abruptly cut the transmission, his silence more telling than words. Mira turned back to her crew, who were watching her with expressions of awe and newfound respect. The alien fleet had paused, hovering just out of range as if uncertain of their next move. "Prepare to fire again," Mira ordered, her voice calm but resolute. "We're not done until they turn tail and leave our space." Reyes nodded, his hands moving over the controls to prime the plasma cannon for a second shot. The weapon hummed to life once more, ready to unleash its fury. The alien fleet hesitated, their formation broken and chaotic, but they were still lingering as though unwilling to admit defeat. Mira narrowed her gaze, focusing on the ships just outside the firing range. She knew that this display of power would only go so far. Dr. Xylox might have been cowed, but he wasn't alone in the Confederacy. Others would come, drawn by the rumors of Earth's defenses, eager to test their strength against humanity's hidden weapon. As if sensing her thoughts, Reyes turned to her, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. "Captain, do you think this will be enough to keep them away?" Mira considered his question, her eyes fixed on the retreating alien ships. "For now," she replied, her tone thoughtful. "But this is only the beginning. They know about the plasma cannon now. They'll be cautious, but they won't stop. The Confederacy is too proud, too driven by their need for dominance, but at least now they'll know what they're dealing with." The plasma cannon's energy levels peaked again, and Mira waited, watching as the alien fleet slowly backed away, inching out of range. She let them go, sensing their fear, their hesitation. They had witnessed humanity's strength, and it had left its mark. This encounter would be etched into the memory of every surviving alien, a reminder that Earth was no easy conquest. Finally, as the last of the alien ships slipped out of the display's range, Mira released a slow breath, feeling the tension ease from her shoulders. The battle had ended, but the message had only just begun to spread. She turned to her crew, a small, proud smile crossing her face. "Stand down," she announced. "We've shown them enough for today." The command center erupted in quiet cheers and sighs of relief, her crew exchanging relieved glances and nods of pride. Mira felt a deep sense of accomplishment as she surveyed the room. She had done it. They had all done it. Against impossible odds, they had stood their ground and defended their home. But as Mira looked back at the empty space on the display where the alien fleet had been, she knew that this was only the first of many battles to come. The alien fleet had disappeared beyond the edge of the holographic display, leaving nothing but empty space in its wake. For a moment, there was only silence in the command center as Mira Hale and her crew absorbed the weight of what they had just accomplished. Their outpost, a lone human defense station on the frontier, had faced down an advanced alien fleet and forced it into retreat. They had defended their home and sent a message to the Confederacy that humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated. A slow smile spread across Mira's face as she surveyed her crew. Their expressions mirrored her own, exhausted, relieved, but above all, proud. They had faced their fears and come out stronger, bound together by a shared triumph. Mira allowed them this moment of quiet celebration, knowing it was well-earned, but also aware that the repercussions of today's battle would reach far beyond the walls of their outpost. "Good work, everyone," she said, her voice carrying through the room. "We did more than just defend this outpost today. We reminded them, and ourselves, what humanity is capable of when we stand together." A ripple of applause broke out, a soft but meaningful sound that filled the command center with warmth and unity. Mira watched her crew exchange smiles and pats on the back, their morale lifted by their victory. She knew that each of them would carry this moment with them, a memory that would fuel their determination in the challenges yet to come. But as the initial exhilaration faded, Mira's mind turned to the consequences of their actions. The plasma cannon had been a success, but now the Confederacy knew about it. They had witnessed its devastating power firsthand, and she had no doubt that word of this encounter would spread like wildfire. They would be cautious, but they wouldn't stay away. This was only the beginning of what would likely be a series of tests, each one harder than the last. "Captain," Lieutenant Reyes interrupted her thoughts, his voice low but steady. "Incoming message from the Confederacy. It's Dr. Xylox." Again, Mira's jaw tightened, but she nodded, gesturing for Reyes to put the transmission on the main screen. The image of Dr. Xylox flickered to life, his face bearing an expression she hadn't seen before. Gone was the arrogance, the mocking condescension. Instead, his eyes were hard, and his mouth was a thin line of barely contained fury. It was clear that their victory had bruised more than just his pride. "Captain Hale," Xylox began, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. "Congratulations on your unexpected display of force. You've made your point, but don't think for a moment that this will change anything. The Confederacy will not be intimidated by a single human outpost or your primitive weaponry." Mira met his gaze with calm defiance. "Primitive?" she replied, a hint of irony in her tone. "That's a bold statement coming from someone who just watched his fleet turn tail and run. Maybe you should reconsider what you think you know about humanity." Xylox's face darkened, his expression shifting to one of barely veiled contempt. "We are millions strong, Captain. This encounter was a minor inconvenience. Your little display will be forgotten, a mere blip in the Confederacy's timeline. We will return, and when we do, you won't be able to hide behind that weapon." Mira smiled, unshaken. She had expected as much, and part of her even welcomed the challenge. "Then consider this a warning, Doctor. Humanity doesn't need to hide behind anything. We're prepared to defend ourselves, and we won't bow to your threats. If you choose to test us again, we'll be ready." Xylox's face contorted, a mixture of rage and disbelief flashing across his features, but then he forced a cold, thin smile. "Very well, Captain Hale. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. The Confederacy does not forget, and neither do I." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the screen dark. Mira turned back to her crew, who were watching her with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. The silence hung thick in the room as they processed the implications of Xylox's words. She knew what they were feeling, the elation of victory mingling with the fear of what lay ahead. But Mira also knew that the best way to keep them focused was to turn that fear into resolve. "Let him remember us," she said firmly, addressing her crew. "Let them all remember today. The Confederacy can send their threats, their armies, even their most advanced technology. We will face whatever comes next, together." Her words bolstered them, and she saw the spark of determination return to their eyes. They were a small crew, isolated on a distant outpost, but they were far from defenseless. She had trained them well, and they had proved themselves today. Mira had no doubts that they would do so again if necessary. As the adrenaline faded, the practicalities of their situation became clear. The outpost was battered, shields depleted, and there was extensive damage to several sections from the initial blasts. Repairs would be necessary, and they had little time to waste. Mira turned to Reyes, who was already pulling up a damage report on his console. "Reyes, prioritize critical repairs and assess our resources. We need to get our defenses back online as quickly as possible," she ordered, "and make sure the plasma cannon is fully recharged. We'll be ready if they come back sooner than expected." Reyes nodded, his fingers moving swiftly over the console as he coordinated with the engineering teams. The crew dispersed, each member returning to their stations with renewed purpose. Mira could see the weariness in their faces, but also the pride. They had earned that pride, and she would make sure it stayed with them no matter what came next. With the immediate tasks underway, Mira took a moment to reflect. She glanced out of the viewing panel, her eyes tracing the stars that stretched endlessly beyond the outpost. Somewhere out there, the Confederacy would be regrouping, plotting their next move. But for the first time, Mira felt certain that humanity would stand a fighting chance. They had shown the galaxy that humans weren't a weak, defenseless species. They had proven their strength, their resilience, and their willingness to protect their own. She knew there would be more battles, more challenges that would test them all. The Confederacy would not give up so easily, but Mira felt ready, knowing that she had led her crew through their first true encounter and had come out victorious. They were prepared for whatever lay ahead, and she would continue to stand by them, leading with the unwavering resolve that had carried them through today. "Captain," Reyes called, breaking her thoughts, "our repairs are underway. Shields will be up to 70% within the next few hours, and we're working on stabilizing the external systems." Mira nodded, reassured. "Good. Keep me updated on our progress, and let's monitor all surrounding sectors closely. If there's any sign of the Confederacy, I want to know about it immediately." As she moved away from the console, she paused to look at her crew one last time. They had been tested, pushed to their limits, and they had risen to the occasion. Mira felt a swell of pride, knowing that they would continue to rise to whatever challenges awaited them. "Remember this day," she said quietly to herself, a promise that resonated through the silence of the command center. It was a promise to her crew, to Earth, and to humanity as a whole. They would be ready, no matter who or what dared to come next.